Okay, so last week we talked about the reveal of Horizon Forbidden West and its Burning Shores DLC coming to PC, Nixis at the Con. Very exciting stuff. This week we actually got a trailer which confirmed some features, and Alex is going to tell you all about it.
Yes. So, yeah, thank you, Rich, for the handoff. We got DLSS, we've got DLAA, we've got XESS, and FSR2, I believe, is actually in the press release. They don't say if they have FSR3 frame gen.
No.
It was not explicit. I would hope it is, though, because Nixies, they add almost any kind of PC exclusive tech to a game that they can when they've been doing these ports. So I hope it's in there. Maybe that's going to be at a separate press release time in the future. I have no idea why. Because they still have to say some other things. They still have to say, for example, what recommended and minimum specs looks like. And usually their recommended and minimum specs are good, actually, for describing at least a general experience of play.
Yeah.
But the other interesting little information here is that they explicitly say that the game is going to support DirectStorage for fast loading. Unlike, let's say, Ratchet and Clank, which was a game designed for PlayStation 5, and was doing, I would say, more loading mid-gameplay, that wasn't really a thing, was it, John, for Horizon Forbidden West? Was it like mid-game loading? Because it was also a PS4 game.
Yeah, I think maybe it was just like a fast travel thing, kind of. But in general, maybe. I think it was, it's an open world game, so if you're just playing it without that, you're pretty much seamlessly moving through that world. So, as you say, it did work on PS4, though it got there by massively reducing the amount of detail, bespoke detail in a scene, right? Like the PS5 version just had way more assets at any time on screen because obviously you could load all that, whereas on PS4, they had to simplify what they were showing, I think, just to make it possible to fetch it from the hard drive fast enough while you're running around, no doubt. But
you think it was? You think they were doing a lot of active swapping and gameplay on the PlayStation 5 version?
I think they had to be.
Interesting.
That's because the world itself is like ultra mega dense, and there's just so many like unique areas within like a small spot, and it's just, especially once you get up in the air and everything and start flying around, it needs to fetch that data quickly, right? And I actually think though with the new cloud sim and some of the other stuff in the DLC, that's probably why that didn't come to PS4, because they started to push it just a little bit too hard. And I think that is part of the PC release, right? Like it's the complete version.
It's they've got
so that's
Burning Shores.
So Burning Shores in there. That makes sense. But
I don't
think it's going to be like a Ratchet kind of situation in terms of pushing loading on the PC, but I'll be curious to see where the bottlenecks are. Like, what is this game pushing hardware-wise, memory-wise, bandwidth-wise, while you're actually playing? And we can kind of monitor some of that now, thanks to the PC version.
Yeah. I hope we get to do that, and I think we'll do that. I'll probably do, like, flying. How long does it take to get to flying mount? I have no idea.
You're not getting a flying mount. Let me just put it that way.
Yeah,
from what I recall, it was
world
near
games,
the end of the game when I almost finished.
Oh my gosh,
so, yeah. It's not a short. It's not a short game.
Yeah, unless they provide me with saves, there's no way that's happening for a review time period. So that's one thing to look at. Look at where the bottlenecks lie for different machines. Another thing to look at is reporting on Ratchet and Clank and recently loading it up. There were some frame time issues in that game, and the reporting wasn't so great always, but people are saying that disabling DirectStorage was a great way to improve frame time, specifically on NVIDIA GPUs. That's another thing I'm going to look at in this game, kind of myth bust a little bit about that, if it is using DirectStorage GPU decompression in a meaningful way during gameplay, because that was one thing. Like, we saw DirectStorage being implemented in Ratchet and Clank, but oddly enough, you could turn it off by deleting files, and the game didn't run really that much differently and it loaded maybe even faster if you deleted things like a PSO file, which I did test.
Phantasy Star Online file. Excellent.
Phantasy Star Online file. So it's kind of interesting to talk about DirectStorage now because it was unveiled right when the Xbox was unveiled, and then they, coming to PC later. But at the moment, we've seen so little of it, and what we've gotten is basically from almost one developer, as in the full implementation, and it didn't cause heads to spin. And it doesn't seem like it's some sort of like secret sauce at this point in time for anything. And I would love to hear what you all think about DirectStorage, because currently I'm still like in the phase. I'm like how like VRS is kind of like a not so interesting thing anymore. Variable rate shading. How it's like, I'd rather have DLSS and have much better image quality.
Yes. Okay. Well, it's all to prove, isn't it? I mean, here's the thing, right? I mean, doing these tests by removing the DirectStorage DLLs, which basically forced Ratchet to use a fallback. That was the theory, right? That was the testing methodology. And yet, for reviewers doing that, they're falling back to like, extremely high-end CPUs, which have likely got the CPU overhead to do the decompression, and so therefore the burden is removed from the GPU, and probably you would get better frame times, right? That's the thing. The question is like, what happens on like a Steam Deck or ROG Ally or a mid-range PC, with a less like a 6-core lower clocked CPU. Possibly the GPU would be the better scenario there for doing the decompression. It's kind of, this is one scenario where you kind of wish that, the bespoke hardware blocks for a console could be present on a PC, because it, it just takes care of it, it totally sort of separate area.
Add-in card, do it. PhysX.
So, that's a tricky one. I mean, you'd have to test across a whole range of equipment levels there.
Yeah. And maybe that's something to do in the future. I'm thinking that like in a year or two from now, I would love to do a DX12U, not post-mortem, but like health check. And I would love to say, like, in the video, like, how are mesh shaders doing? Are we actually seeing them in games? Are they bringing about new levels of geometric density? Alan Wake, we got maybe they'll update Avatar
right,
at
Alex.
some point,
It's been a bit of a blind alley, hasn't it?
DRS.
Yep.
Hardware level VRS.
Yeah, hardware level VRS has been, in my humble opinion, pretty disappointing. And
I've never seen an implementation that I actually like for what it buys back. It just doesn't.
Well, the id-Tech stuff.
Even it was okay, but even then, like I remember comparing because it was turned on Xbox, it was off on PS5.
Right.
Xbox had higher rendering resolution in that game as a result. But in reality, if you actually looked into any of the surfaces, the Xbox version was lacking detail. It almost looked like you were looking at a video clip at times versus the other version. And that's basically what VRS does to it in general.
Yeah, that's the hardware level stuff. I was on the AMD side. I was thinking more of the Wolfenstein implementation that was done with NVIDIA on PC. And to be fair, the VRS stuff that the Coalition did on Gears 5.
Much better, arguably.
I didn't go into detail on this in the video because and maybe it's because I couldn't see that big of a difference in performance, but Tekken 8 has VRS in the options menu, which is interesting. But because that game is locked at 60 FPS, I didn't find that much of a use for it, and it also seemed to have zero impact on Steam Deck in terms of performance.
Right.
So I had no personal reason to use it, but it's
VRS is an interesting one where like in the few times where I've been able to toggle it on and off at a high resolution, the performance improvement has been so minuscule. Yep. Except for in those cases where a game has allowed you to toggle how much VRS degradation occurs, and you can get like something like 15% performance improvement for a much, much worse looking game. I don't know. Yeah, I'm kind of not so happy with VRS as it currently is. I think the future there's just never been a good way to like get rid of the blocky VRS nature, and I always thought that would be something that TAA could solve. by reconstructing the block over time, but I just don't see it anywhere.
It doesn't
almost.
seem to do that, does it?
No one's
Remember
done it.
Dead Space? Where
Dead Space.
Gosh, the Dead Space
Exact
remake.
opposite.
I mean, obviously the PS5 version had like software VRS, which was complete garbage tier, and I'm glad they removed it. But even the hardware VRS, like on PC and such, like until they allowed you to turn that off, like image quality was destroyed basically. It was absolutely terrible because VRS especially does not behave well in those like low light environments with a lot of like granular, like near black detail. It ends up, like I said before, it basically turns your real-time game into looking more like a video stream. It suddenly feels like you're streaming the game rather than playing it locally.
Yeah, the compression look isn't great, and that's why I feel like its usage has just not been, no one's figured it out yet, I don't think, in a really, really great way.
I think I can name one.
Are you thinking about IW?
You're right. Yeah, the Infinity Ward software solution, which basically works across all platforms. And I've seen the millisecond differentials at Infinity Ward's HQ, and it can be like really, really impactful to performance. And it is basically, bespoke from the ground up. And it's really, really impressive, I thought.
Yeah. That's a good
Can
point.
I say? But that is not a hardware VRS solution that is being used on the console, or rather the Series X and the Series S, and in RDNA 2 GPUs. And it also applies to NVIDIA, right? They've got their own VRS setup, which is different from AMD's.
Yeah, it's a bit of a shame. We do have. I was asked recently. It's interesting that you say that Tekken has VRS, because it was added to Unreal Engine 5. So I'm curious what version of Unreal Engine 5 they have. It must be one of the most recent ones, actually.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. Yeah.
Because I think it was added in 5.2 or later.
Interestingly, by the way, and I need to fiddle with this. I think it's somewhat broken, but in the demo, there's this like tool, like this Tekken tool you can use, right? And one of the features they added is you can turn on Lumen in the game.
Oh, wow.
But the game is not set up for it right now, right? So the examples I saw, you turn it on and like parts of the background just go completely black, and you can see some things that it's doing, but like clearly it's not built for that, so it doesn't work properly. But it did give me hope that modders could eventually get their hands on this and figure out how to inject proper Lumen.
Well, Tekken is in our next news topic, so let's
go to it.
We should just move on at this point.
Yeah.